SWAT 4 is a first-person tactical police simulator developed using the Unreal-based Vengeance engine and was created by Irrational Games, who are also known for System Shock 2, Tribe's Vengeance, and Bioshock Infinite. And at one point they were actually owned by 2K. They later went on to merge with Activision to create a giant piece of shit, and depending on what you know the company as, whether it's online entertainment or online systems, will aid you. But Sierra themselves were known for some pretty big hitting game series, such as King's Quest, Space Quest, Police Quest, Leisure Suit Larry Quest, and were actually the original publishers for Half-Life Quest. They weren't the biggest dogs in the kennel, but they were up there, and I think if you were to place them on a modern timeline, they'd probably fit like somewhere between Sega and Techland. You know, companies that have had big hitters in the past, but just seem to have like disappeared a bit. Police Quest is a police adventure game based around the experiences of ex-police officer Jim Walls, who, after being introduced to Sierra Online's co-founder and president Ken Williams, Ken explained that he'd love to make a police-themed game with a genuine police officer involved in its development to ensure that realism and authenticity was a big selling point. But it wasn't for a few years until Williams actually invited Walls over for squash. And, you know, I can also only assume that they were both wearing really colourful spandex, like Mr. Motivator, and maybe like there's a dude in the background who it looks a bit like Donnie Bennett, and he's just holding a water bottle and a towel in his suit, and the mustache. After the two spent time together in a sweaty, closed-off room hitting their balls against a wall, Williams popped the question to, you know, what possibly could be a PTSD-riddled ex-cop to go for, you know, go for a little drinky poo. Williams asked Walls if he'd look to condense his experiences with the police into short stories, to which he agreed and almost started writing immediately, creating a 2-page short story, which went down so well that Walls was sent off to turn it into 4 or 5 pages. And the team also wanted to have additional details included. This continued back and forth until the short story had eventually developed into the plot for the first Police Quest game. Walls himself was actually very unfamiliar with computers and was actually unsure if it could ever be a viable career. But of course, being surrounded by many other people who could find out where the on and off switches are on computers, they helped Walls tremendously, and he began to pick up computing from Sierra's designers. Police Quest was based on a lot of aspects of Walls' life. Walls' son, Sonny, played Sonny in the police adventure game that included the name of Walls' son, Sonny, who shared the same name as the protagonist, Sonny, who plays Sonny's son. Not only the protagonist, but also many incidences encountered in the first and 2 other subsequent games were actually inspired by things that had happened to Walls in his career. Imagine being the person that got caught, like, during one of the lowest points of their lives. But you know, they've turned their lives around. And they've got a nice stable income, a family, and they come home from a job that probably has a Rolodex and those elevators that have that really distinctive bing. Probably that as well. Lots of cream. And they get back and switch on the Amiga to play the new Police Quest game. And wait, oh, would you look at that? That's you. That's you stealing those bottles of Bucky from Offie. They didn't even change your name. and they included the bit where you pissed yourself. But after the release, Walls was inundated with fan mail sent in by players who also wanted to be able to yell the Miranda rights at a guy who he'd shot in the face because he asked you directions in a friendly but slightly threatening manner, and you were pretty certain that you heard the ping of an M1 Garand reloading in the man's pockets. So, naturally, you pull out your service revolver as quick as you could. I personally want to inspire the kids to take up the life of a swamp witch, and, you know, you get fucking really cool fucking strands of damp moss to, like, hang all over yourself. And, you know, if you find yourself a really crooked stick, oh, that's it, you have the look at that point, you know? You've got your robes, you've got your moss, and you got your stick. If that doesn't sound inspiring, then I don't think you should be here. Walls would go on to help out the Police Quest sequels and codename Iceman. After Walls left to join Tsunami Games, Sierra worked on the most intensive multimedia CD ever with Police Quest Open Season, to which they said, "You know what, Jim? You go on. You go make your Iceman. We don't need you anymore. Go on. You're a small-time cop." Well, you were. Now you're just a fucking nerdy video game developer. Because we've now got the former LAPD chief, Daryl F. Gates. And not just that, but we've now got a guy in who can make really good cover art. So, you bet you, he is gonna get a game cover that's gonna look like a cool Van Damme flick. Open Season, it wasn't received very well. However, Police Quest SWAT did end up becoming a bit of a medium hit, selling over 152,000 copies in the first 6 months, which, sure, you know, that sounds like what you would probably see as a relatively low-selling game now. This was the 90s, and home computer was not as popular as some of the other platforms available at the time, and in 2 years it ended up surpassing 1 million copies. It really shows the scale of the popularity that this title had. Police Quest SWAT 2 and SWAT 3 sold relatively well, but just not quite as well as Police Quest SWAT. That is until 2005, when SWAT 4... Oh god. Alright, okay, sure. Let's just get this over with. SWAT Global Strike Team is a game that got made that isn't a tactical shooter. It's a bad version of Rainbow Six or Soldier of Fortune.
Stack it up. Get those hands in the air! Contact. We have suspect contact. Go! Time to move! Hands in the air! Here they come! Run! Reaching with C2, sir.
Barricade hostage situation.
On your knees! Moving clear. Going ready. Get down! Hands in the air! See that? Moving now. Don't shoot! Go! Police, hands up now!
In SWAT 4, the player leads a team in resolving various scenarios such as hostage situations, bomb threats, graffiti, jaywalking, you know, the real criminal stuff. Each mission is a standalone assignment instead of being an interconnected story, but what it lacks in cohesion, it makes up for in how fleshed out each mission actually is, with full briefings, floor plans, timeline of events, and 911 calls, which really allows you to fully immerse yourself in the scenario.
911 emergency, 107, hello?
There's a woman with a gun at the gas station. I think there was a gunshot. But I drove away.
What's the address?
I don't know. It's on Pitkin, off the interstate.
Okay, and the store's name?
Yeah, it's Quick Fuel on Pitkin Avenue.
The police are on their way. Are you in danger right now?
Oh, no, I don't think so.
Okay, Sharon, can you give me a description of the gunman? Race, height, color of hair, thin, fat?
Yeah, it was a woman. She was white, I think. I don't know how tall. I only got a glimpse and then I left. But I think there were some more people in the store, but, I'm not sure.
2 people, 3 people, more?
More, I guess. I don't know. It was fast.
Loading up SWAT for the first time really does show how this game has aged. It certainly is rough around the edges, but even with the slight adjustments from the original 4:3 aspect ratio and the 1600 by 900 resolution, this game as a whole is held up, okay. If you compare the graphics to modern entries to the genre, then it's kinda like when you're flicking between the graphics mode on Halo Anniversary. But you can and should make that look even better with the SWAT Elite Force mod. If you just want to play the base game without the mod, it doesn't take much tinkering to get it working into 1080. You just need to go into the INI files and change the resolution. And as a word of warning, whilst I was recording this, I may have recorded the entire base game first and then moved on to the DLC, as you'd expect me to do. But what I did actually find during that time is that the INI file wasn't changed for the DLC. So what that meant was that I couldn't actually get 1920 by 1080 resolution. However, what I didn't realize is that I also couldn't move any of my saves across. So I had to start again. But the mod actually adds some really great quality of life improvements alongside 40 new pieces of equipment, suppressed versions of weapons, 3 packs of tactical equipment such as door wedges and grenades, and some more detailed equipment selection allowing you to optimize your loadout even more. The mod also makes it so that the equipment is actually even more realistic. Less lethal equipment is actually less lethal but not entirely non-lethal. Tasers can kill the elderly or those who are in poor health, and beanbags can break bones and fatally injure at close range. Bullets ricochet off of surfaces, and ceramic plate armor actually breaks as more bullet holes are punched into it. The mod combines the original campaign and the DLC into one. All of your missions are incredibly varied, so one time you might be going to raid a house with a few people that have pistols, and next it's a church with a load of heavily armoured mad lads with big old machine guns. There is also a plethora of other added features with this mod, but I would strongly suggest going to check it out. The mod itself also does make quite a difference with the visuals. There's a lot of objects in the world that are a lot crisper. You can read the writing on the walls and whiteboards. You can even see in full detail that items are dropped on the floor. However, to solely lay the praise on this mod for the way that SWAT looks today is a bit of a disservice to the original designers, because they've done a great job of meticulously designing things that most people probably won't even notice. When you're on the selection menu, you get the choice of easy, medium, hard or elite. Don't be fooled though, this doesn't actually make the game any easier. At the beginning you'll probably die, and you'll die quite a lot. Your squad will die, the people you rescue and you'll die, pets will die, your loved ones will die, and eventually you'll be in a sad void with everyone you love dead and wondering, was it worth it? And like, oh yeah, of course it's fucking worth it. Elite ranking says it was. SWAT is undeniably a very unforgiving game and doesn't particularly hold your hand through anything. You're on your own to make your own decisions, and you can play however you want to play, but that will also depend on the difficulty you've actually set the game at. So depending on your difficulty depends on how much of a score you have to pass to the next mission. If you want to go in full guns blazing, I'd strongly suggest that you have it on a lower difficulty, maybe easy or medium. But there's a lot of issues when it comes to the rules of engagement in the game, and when you can and can't actually kill a suspect. There will be times where even if they're just about to shoot at you, it doesn't actually mean you won't get penalised for it if you shoot them back. So if you're going for anything higher than medium, I'd strongly suggest a less lethal approach to the missions, because you can and will lose points for accidental non-lethal use of force. The pass rate for each difficulty goes up incrementally. Easy is 0, so you can do whatever you want, you can screw up as much as you want. As long as you don't die and successfully complete the mission objectives, you're actually all good there. So feel free to kill as many people as you want and it just doesn't matter. Medium and hard add in a minimum score requirement which reflects how well the players actually followed the police procedure. And elite is as it sounds, with the strict score requirement that forces the player to think carefully about the proper use of force if they want to continue on to the next mission. Especially because you'll need a 95% pass rate to actually move on. So a more important question is, how does it actually play? Well, like with most old games, we're now in a place in which we're so used to a refined way of playing that SWAT actually feels like kind of a bit clunky. But I do specifically remember it felt very fluid and reactive when I played SWAT as a kid, but it definitely feels clunky now. It's kinda hard getting used to some of the movement, so you can get stuck on objects, sometimes leaning doesn't seem like it's going far enough, and you can't actually move whilst leaning. And the amount of times I've accidentally misjudged how far I can lean, even later in the game, it just kind of feels like you should have more of a stretch when leaning. Movement in the game is actually quite slow paced, and a lot of the time it's actually better for you to be travelling slowly, as it ensures that if you need to, all of a sudden start firing your weapon, the bullet spread won't be like you're shooting as if you're standing on a vibrating platform with Parkinson's. One thing that I really love about SWAT is its minimalistic UI. I'd imagine if you play around with the settings, you can probably disable the HUD altogether to give yourself an even more authentic experience. However, you'll definitely end up struggling when you're trying to secure that one little bag of evidence that only has a pixel sticking out under the body of a suspect. Throughout, you'll always be reminded that only using lethal force when necessary is advised. Operators are supposed to abide by the rules of engagement whilst carrying out operations, but this doesn't mean it always goes to plan, especially when you have buggy AI in which you can't actually tell if they're about to shoot a hostage or give up. And I don't even think the AI know if they're going to do one or the other thing either, but you will be penalised hard if you make the wrong split-second decision whilst a guy in full military gear aims his gun at you, and you just aren't allowed to fire lethal rounds at a suspect, as they're seen as somebody who isn't an immediate threat. However, you know for a fact that they'll become that threat later, so the score given at the end of the game is also entirely based on the rules of engagement, and it will factor in the number of suspects you've killed or arrested. Same with how many of your own are injured, how many times you reported back to TOC, how much evidence you've secured, and how many civilians are dead or injured, and so on. But let's talk about one of the biggest parts of SWAT, and that's giving commands to your squad, or SWAT element. What an actual fucking mess this part is. You're gonna find yourself giving orders over and over and over for them to just all be stood there and not actually moving or responding, and honestly it's quite a pain. A lot of the time if you've moved ahead and you tell the team to fall in, they'll go whatever way that they want to go, and that doesn't include the safest or optimal route. They'll run through places you've not cleared yet, they'll walk into enemy fire, and the enemy do the same. They'll keep telling you to move because you're in their way when you're trying to use the opti wand under a door.
You're in my spot. Boss, you're in my way. Move over, boss. You're in my spot.
Look, I don't care.
Move
about
over,
the
boss. Boss, you're in my way. Get out of the way.
And one of the more annoying things in the base game is that if you want the teams to actually handcuff the remaining individuals in a room, you have to do it one by one, unless you have the mod, which then you can just use restrain all. And when you've got about 6 or 7 people to arrest in a room, you'll start to see why using the mod is a good idea. But there is one thing that SWAT does better than games do today, and quite a lot of games at the time also use this feature, and of course, that was reflective mirrors. This is something I'm probably always going to keep talking about, but we're in the age of 4K gaming, with ray tracing and amazing ultra-realistic graphics, but we can't have mirrors. But this tactical shooter from 2005 does. And let me tell you, it saves your goddamn life so many times. It makes entering bathrooms less risky, and hell, there's even a mission with a mirror positioned on a landing so that you can evaluate what is happening around the corner. I mean, you can do that also with the Opti one, but who gives a shit about that? I actually found myself genuinely excited to be using mirrors tactically, and honestly, in a strange way, it felt kind of fresh, and sort of like an innovative idea, which for some reason, God knows how many decades later, the games industry still hasn't made it as a standard. And you know, as always, I'm sure there's some sort of fucking development issues that I don't know about. And that's fine, whatever. One of the problems I did find myself having was that I was failing a lot of missions because I fucking suck. The civilians and your team AI don't really have that much in the way of self-preservation, so, you know, I actually just started leaving them and completely went alone, and I actually found myself having a more enjoyable experience. It added a new level of difficulty which, you know, whilst the game is hard enough as it is, personally just felt a bit more immersed in the gameplay because I wasn't having to fucking babysit a load of dumb fuck AI. But the one thing that just keeps bringing me back to SWAT time and time again is the missions. The missions are so varied and, as previously mentioned, aren't actually interconnected, and I believe that if they were, then it wouldn't be anywhere near as memorable. In the base game, some of my favourite missions include the A-Bomb nightclub, in which two rival gangs are shooting at each other and wounding innocents in the process. The Children of Taron, or Taroni, whatever the fuck, the children of the Taroni tenement, in which you have to go raid a cult that has purchased an old apartment building and have filled it with explosives. Oh, and all the children are, yeah, they're missing. But my all-time favourite is the second mission of the base game, which is Fairfax Residence, in which you raid a home of a suspect involved in multiple homicides who tortured and dismembered their victims, and the only reason they were discovered was because of the DNA left under one of the victim's nails. And you have to rescue a hostage of his. The atmosphere in this mission in particular is incredibly fucking creepy, and I believe it's something that the developers really got right. They managed to capture such a fantastic atmosphere throughout, and it's quite clear that this mission also had a profound effect on players in general, because you now have modern titles in the genre that have actually made their own version of this mission. After the success of the base game, a year later in 2006, the DLC, the Stechkov Syndicate, was released, and the expansion itself added 7 new single-player missions which were actually interconnected, surrounding, you guessed it, the Stechkov family, an Eastern European crime syndicate. The story sees you responding to a shootout in progress at a video game arcade, with the missions surrounding the family supplying the local criminals, Christian cults, and pissed off farmers with assault weapons. I personally didn't actually play the DLC when I was younger. Playing it now, it doesn't feel that much different to the base game. It's added new weaponry and equipment, and the best feature of all, the ability to punch uncooperative civilians and suspects.
Get down! Hands in the air! Get out! I see you. Police! Wait, you don't know how to respect your elders? Civilian secured.
There are so many things that SWAT got right, and whilst AI might not be the one thing, they definitely got the music, the atmosphere and sound design correct. The guns, equipment, footsteps, explosions, lockpicking, everything sounds like it was meticulously crafted by a Foley artist. Whilst there is a general lack of music in most levels, those with music really pack a punch.
No contacts visible.
Copy. EMTs standing by.
Police! Get down now! On the ground, now! Get down! Hands in the air! Drop your weapon! Get those hands up! Hands up!
So far I've been praising this game for the majority of what it's worth, but it's quite undeniable that there's a lot of issues and there's a lot of bugs, and by bugs I mean there are a fucking lot of bugs, and they will get you killed. They'll get your team killed, you'll get civilians killed, and just all the fucking stupid AI, because they absolutely love running in front of your line of fire when shooting. I mean, honestly, the majority of the time, the AI struggle on how to respond to a locked door or getting civilians to comply with your commands due to their fucking room temperature IQ. And it's so frustrating. There is also a lot of clipping issues through doors. I've noticed a few times there would be gunshots coming from pretty much nowhere, and then would find that the guy is actually firing in a different room and the bullets had clipped through a door and a bit of the wall. But whilst there are these annoying bugs, I didn't find anything that was completely game breaking, and I don't think that I've ever actually come across something which has crashed my game entirely, which is good. Luckily, I didn't fall through the floor in any of the missions and didn't run into any issues with the physics. There was the odd occasion where some of the guns that you've picked up to secure as evidence disappear, but that could just be me missing them on the floor. Overall, I genuinely feel that SWAT has really stood the test of time and does a lot that newer games just don't. It offers that challenge, but it also makes it so that you can play it exactly how you want, as long as you know that you'll have to live with those repercussions if you're playing on a harder difficulty. No matter how much you feel like you could just shoot everyone in sight if you're playing it on those difficulties, you simply don't have that option to go on some sort of Archer-style rampage. SWAT is a game that's like no other. It's what I wish Rainbow Six Siege was, and it's a shame we probably won't end up seeing another game in the series, but it does please me to know that there's still a strong community out there modding it and still playing both the single player and multiplayer versions of the game, and that it hasn't just faded into obscurity like a lot of other more realistic niche titles have. So if you actually want to check it out, you can get the gold edition of SWAT 4 on GOG, which I'm pretty sure they've now added to their good old games list. So yeah, it's worth it. It's worth whatever the price it is for when you're looking. It's good. If it's on sale, good. If it's not on sale, good. Buy it anyway, just buy it. It's a really good game. And as a game that has, you know, a lot of the fucking problems that it does, I really can't see it dying anytime soon, given the fact that it's still around now.